Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us, whether you're in the west and it's still morning, or in the east where it's finally made it to Monday afternoon. Thank you for coming along. This is the monthly NRM Regions Australia Industry Partnership webinar run through their Industry Partnership project, and I'm Kate Forrest. I host them. For those of you that have been to a few of these before, you'll know that they're a quick webinar. So I'll do some quick introductions. We'll then have a presentation, and whatever time left we have of the 45 minutes, we can dedicate to Q&A with our presenter. We will be recording, and as always, we will finish within the 45 minutes. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all meeting today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here today, and in my case, I acknowledge the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. Today's presenter is Harriet Bawden. Harriet works for Meat and Livestock Australia. She's the project manager of the Northern Beef Adoption program. Harriet is going to give us some background into MLA's carbon training and extension programs, focusing on CarbonEdge. CarbonEdge is a program that helps participants, land managers mostly, and considering it's MLA, graziers mostly, develop their understanding of carbon and move into planning and action phase, identifying practices and technologies that could be incorporated into their business to benefit their bottom line and their environment. I thought this was particularly pertinent considering there's the carbon outreach grants out at the moment, and we're all trying to get our heads around what is happening with carbon extension around the country. Okay, Harriet, without any further ado, let's get your screen shared and you can start talking to the people.
I think you've got me, have you, Kate?
We do have you.
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Thank you all for having me along to the webinar today, and thank you for the introduction and acknowledgement, Kate. As Kate said, I work at MLA in the adoption team. I'm one of 8 in our adoption team. For those of you who, I guess, aren't aware of MLA or our background, we are the levy-funded RDC for beef, sheep and goats in Australia. And we work very closely with a lot of the other regional development corporations to deliver research, development and extension, as well as marketing for industry. So the purpose of the adoption team is really to work as an intermediary between our research teams and I guess our project partners on the ground who are delivering extension services to the industry. And we do this in a various sort of methodology. We have what we call awareness programs, which are sort of one-day forums, I guess communications campaigns, webinars, things like that, that are about raising awareness of what's around for producers and industry. We have what's called what we term short-term training programs. So that's programs that sort of look that sort of workshop field day type structure. And they're normally sort of 1 to 3 day workshops, which is where Edge fits in, which I'll touch on in a moment. And we have our longer term supported practice change programs like producer demonstration sites, profitable grazing systems, and some new programs in the north and the south that really are there to support producers over the longer term to, I guess, identify opportunities for their business and gradually test and trial changes and measure how they are performing and see how other people do it. So that sort of peer-to-peer learning component as well. As Kate mentioned, she did ask me to touch on a couple of our carbon programs with a special focus on CarbonEdge. So we'll introduce CarbonEdge first, and then I guess I'll give you some context for where it fits in the carbon landscape and what MLA is thinking around extension in the carbon space. But also would love to hear from the group about anything else in the pipeline that we should be aware of or ways we could be working with you. Obviously, the goal to be carbon neutral by 2030 is an ambitious goal for the red meat industry, and it will take a lot of change and support for the industry to reach that point. MLA has pretty significant investment in research and technologies to help producers get there. But of course, the critical point is actually getting that out onto farm and getting those changes implemented and measured to be able to report against CN30. So without further ado, CarbonEdge. We did test this before and now oh no, there we go. My slides are moving. MLA's Edge Network is one of our core training programs. So it's been running for 20 years and it's taken various forms. Some people may have heard the name. The way it runs is that MLA has developed, I guess, the package, so to speak, and the IP. And then we have delivery contracts with a whole range of people across Australia, both private and, I guess, government and public entities who deliver the programs. And Edge is a commercialised model. So it's a participant pays model, which can be subsidised. But it means that we've been able to keep the program running for a very long time. And those who deliver it with us, I guess, are invested in running it because it forms part of their business. So they get out there, run workshops, I guess, get to know some of the industry, form relationships that may be part of their broader business model around one-on-one consultation or other extension and adoption programs they provide. And the MLA's commitment to Edge is that we provide sort of a supporting coordinator to do a lot of the, I guess, the promotion and logistics of the program, but also that we commit to updating it. So we really hang our hat on the fact that the Edge network programs have been developed with a lot of research and I guess best practice sort of tried and tested information, and they get revised pretty often, I guess, to make sure that they're delivering the latest R&D to the industry in a way that's very practical for their business. So the current packages are business, breeding, grazing land management, and grazing fundamentals, which is the one-day version, and nutrition Edge. And CarbonEdge will piggyback onto the back of these. Now, you don't have to have completed any particular Edge programs, but we do design them so they all marry up, I suppose. So they all use the same terminology and the same concepts so that you, as a producer, are getting, I guess, a complement of information that supports on-farm productivity with the other sort of technical concepts. CarbonEdge. So what's the purpose of CarbonEdge? CarbonEdge will be designed as a 2-day workshop. All Edge workshops, I guess, take, I guess, in inverted commas, what we call a classroom-based approach, and then we try to get people up and about to do some practical activities. Obviously, things like grazing land management is a little more conducive to getting out and having a walk in a paddock, but we do try to weave in, I guess, a combination of information presented to producers and then applied. And all Edge programs, participants come away with an action plan. So in the case of CarbonEdge, the whole program's been designed around a way that we can get participants thinking about, I guess, understanding carbon. What is carbon? How does it cycle in an agricultural system? What influence do I have over, I guess, greenhouse gas emissions within my business? And then what's relevant to me in terms of the production system that I run and the goals that I want for my business in terms of succession, improved productivity, the market output of the product, environmental stewardship, all those types of things. So it's really important to us that CarbonEdge and I guess, the production system that our producers are operating in all sort of marry up. And so we've designed the program that way. We've designed it to cover, I guess, key terminology and concepts around carbon. That's both, I suppose, some of those technical concepts, as well as it does touch on some of the market concepts, the practices and technologies to measure, reduce and sequester greenhouse gas emissions within a grazing business. And obviously MLA, as I mentioned, has a lot of investment in these practices and technologies at the moment. So something that we will continue adding to over time. Really, back to the alignment between carbon and production goals, helping producers, I guess, navigate through the guff and the confusion and I guess even the sales pitches that some of them seem to be facing at the moment and a bit confused by in terms of what generating credits means and whether a carbon project is something suitable for them and something they want to pursue, or whether there are options to, I guess, inset carbon for other reasons within the business. I guess understanding what's involved in projects and market opportunities in terms of product credentials and things like that. And then finally, development of an action plan. So the course, like all other EDGE programs, will be developed sort of as a modularised form. And throughout the program, people will be working on this action plan as they go. So the goal setting will be right up front as we go through options to reduce emissions. They'll be thinking about what's feasible for them. And same again in terms of options for sequestering emissions within a livestock grazing business. They'll be working through what's feasible within their business. And the ideal outcome is to have this action plan that forms a list of things that they want to pursue based on perhaps a prioritisation process, a list of next steps, and an understanding of, I guess, some of the actions or changes they might make within their business. This is really just a snapshot in case I missed it, but CarbonEdge, the intent is for it to be offered nationally. One of the advantages, I guess, of the model that we have for EDGE, in that we have a whole lot of different deliverers nationally that we partner with, is that we rely on those deliverers to regionalise the program a little bit, so they understand what the I guess the system is like that they're operating with. They understand the ecology of the environment they're operating in, different plant types, different feed types, different stock types, even livestock species and market pathways and things like that. So we want to form, I guess, a national network of deliverers who can help us deliver CarbonEdge. It'll be designed for grass-fed cattle, sheep and goat. We have got some information in there that's relevant to feedlot systems, but we understand they've got their own carbon activities in the pipeline. And similar for mixed systems, we are really keen to work in with the grains industry to make sure that the program, I guess, caters for those systems as well. It will be a 2-day workshop with a little bit of pre-work required, and I will come back to this in a minute because I'll talk a little bit about where it fits in with other carbon programs. And I guess I've pitched it here as foundational to intermediate and a progression from existing programs. So that might take me on to my next slide. So what we sort of recognise is that there are a few products on the market at the moment that cover carbon accounting. You've got, for example, Uni of Melbourne's Carbon Neutral Ag course. I've not been involved in AgVic's course, but I know that they've been developing some stuff for graziers as well. MLA did a previous run of carbon accounting workshops and has a carbon accounting technical manual. MLA has also developed e-learning modules with supporting how-to videos and repurposed the SB-GAF calculator into an online, easy-to-use calculator. So rather than doing more on carbon accounting, we really wanted to help people move forward into the what does this mean for my business? When we go out to industry events, when we have presentations on, I guess, carbon, the CN30 goal, carbon, and some of the technologies in development, the question that we always get from producers is, okay, I kind of get this now, or I've got a feel for what we're talking about, and I see all this stuff in the media and I know the landscape, but what does that actually mean for me personally and at my farm business level? So that's where we really wanted CarbonEdge to fit. And as I mentioned, really the focus is to get people to the point where they have a plan that sort of conceptualizes what's completely relevant for the individual in the course. And then the ideal is for us or for us to work with somebody to develop that next step, which is a sort of a supported longer term practice change project where people might start putting some of these practices in place, and we look at measuring how they're going. And that's the types of things we could do with our producer demonstration sites program and that type of thing. And Kate and I did talk very briefly about Carbon Outreach program. We don't know a lot more than anybody else at this point in time. But so we're not exactly sure where this fits in here. But we're hoping that because we're offering, I guess, a course that's been designed by and quite specific to the red meat industry, and we're spending a bit of time, I guess, in investing sort of into that 2-day model, it might give people that level of detail that they're looking for, rather than sort of, I guess, the introductory piece on carbon. So where are we up to in this development? And I guess, what are the next steps? How can people get involved? The development's been done in 2 parts. So we worked with Environmental Accounting Services. Some of you might be familiar with them because they help to deliver the UniMel Carbon Neutral Ag course. They were the technical lead for the program. So they developed our core technical manual that will be the sort of the Bible, so to speak, for the deliverers. And then we've had that supplemented with material, I guess, from across MLA and our project partners in terms of weaving in the livestock production side. We've then been working with Pinion Advisory to, I guess, transform that into a participant manual. So something that's not quite as technically overly complex, but essentially conveys the key principles and also weaves in the extension activities to the program. And they'll also be developing all the supporting extension materials like the workshop PowerPoint and the run sheet and activity booklets and things like that. The whole way along, we've had a working group sit behind the project. So we've had producers and advisors from different regions. We quite specifically wanted advisors and producers from Northern Australia, central sort of rangelands and Southern Australian systems. And we've also been supported by people reviewing the manual who have been involved in some of our investments in that carbon neutral and sustainability space. So people who are working on some of the projects with us. And as mentioned earlier, we've got a commitment to updating CarbonEdge. So one of the trickiest parts about this landscape is how quickly things are changing in terms of standards and protocols, also new information and new R&D emerging. And one advantage that we have is that we are pretty much at the forefront of that at the moment. So we'll be updating Edge as we go. And the way we manage that for our deliverers is by providing them with regular updates and also, I guess, maintaining the material in a central database for those deliverers to have access to each time they go out and deliver. So we've done the technical development. We're in the stage at the moment of finalising the extension resources, and we'll build up some trainer capacity from the working group. So those advisors who have been on the working group will help us pilot 5 workshops between now and December is the idea. And then we'll make adjustments to the program based on the feedback that we get from those pilots and how they go. And we're aiming to have another Train the Trainer early next year. And that Train the Trainer we're hoping to open out to industry. So we'll be looking for EOIs probably about September, October this year, and have a look at where we've got people who may be interested in delivering and where they're based, what their areas of expertise are, and then looking at how we train those people up early next year and potentially set up a bit of a co-delivery model for people to, I guess, have a few runs on the board before going out and running the workshops independently. Those trainers will be looking for from, I guess, a whole subset of regions, which is great, and also trainers who represent both the public and private sector are very welcome to get involved. Just in terms of where those are, it's still a bit of a work in progress, but at this stage, this is what we're looking at. People on this call would be welcome to come along to these pilot workshops if they happen to be in an area near you. And if you are interested to get involved beyond perhaps running workshops, once we hit the ground running in 2024, we will be looking at where we start our run of workshops. So if that's something that's of interest in your region, or you have a group already at the point where they might benefit from engaging in a workshop or something like that, we can absolutely work with you to get something sorted. Edge generally runs on sort of an EOI basis. So where we've got some interest, we normally try and pull a workshop together. We don't sort of have a set calendar. We try and work with the regions based on producer interest or engagement. So from you, I guess, if anyone's interested, certainly looking for workshop deliverers, we're looking for people to help us get some workshops running. You're also welcome to attend a pilot, and also, I guess, just help to get the message out, because we certainly know there are producers asking about carbon and looking for a bit of clarity and independent advice with all the media and interest in this space at the moment. So that's certainly where we think we can help a little bit. Happy to take some questions now, though, if anyone's got any.
Thanks, Harriet. We do have one. Nikki Ledger from Southwest NRM in Western Australia has said the train the trainer approach sounds very similar to what the federal government is looking at for its carbon farming outreach program. Are you applying to the carbon outreach? Do you know if MLA is applying to the carbon outreach program or working with the Australian government on incorporating the CarbonEdge package into their training package? I know it's tricky because they haven't actually contracted their tender yet, but yeah, if you can answer from the MLA side, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So I don't think at this stage we will tender to run it. We have had that conversation. I guess the way MLA works is quite similar, I suppose, to what the federal government's proposing, in that we don't have our own extension staff on the ground, so we're working with other extension partners. So in that sense, you're right, it'd be quite a similar model. So we'd be contracting to recontract, which might be administratively very inefficient. So what we're looking at is whether, once we have a little bit more clarity on what the federally designed program is, whether we could see some alignment in marrying that up to this workshop. We certainly did flag that when the grant came out, but we don't know any more than anybody else at the moment about the successful tender or the proposed program. Again, I haven't been heavily involved, but my understanding is that the national program will cater for all industries. So that's where we did have a think about how we could use CarbonEdge in that way. And we just felt like the more we got into CarbonEdge, the more content there was and the more difficult it became to make it universal and still provide enough detail in terms of what I talked about, in terms of trying to get producers beyond the sort of preliminary understanding and into a planning phase. But I think, to be honest, we really need to run some of the pilots to see how we go, how much time things take, where people are at when they come into that workshop in terms of whether we're pitching it at the right level, whether we think that there's opportunity to start bringing in more complex business systems or more varied business systems. You know, is it feasible to work with producers in the room who might come from livestock farming and grain farming all in one go, or do you need to run, I guess, industry-specific workshops? Yeah, so we've just started with what we know well as the industry body and what we've got all the research on. And I think once we've got the pilots down pat, we'll have a better understanding of how it might marry up with some of the other programs like Carbon Outreach.
No problem. Nikki, does that answer your question? I can see you vaguely nodding and putting a thumb up, so that's great. The next question is from Christine Allen. She's wondering what sort of follow-up does CarbonEdge provide to workshop attendees? So is there any follow-up?
That's a good question. The Edge network is typically a little bit deliverer dependent. So as I mentioned, a lot of deliverers treat the Edge workshop as one part of their business model, and they certainly get a lot of opportunity to follow up independently with participants. We have talked a lot about whether we need to formalise follow-up. One of the challenges we've had with Edge in the past is that we incorporated it as part of what you pay for when you come, and we found a less than 50% return rate on people coming to the follow-up workshop. And that made it very difficult to make commercially viable for the deliverers, particularly people who might have been travelling to somewhat remote locations or, a fair bit of travel to follow up for, 1 day or half a day with half the numbers. So we have been thinking about whether we could have a follow-up that's a little bit more universal. So you might run a workshop at a localised level, but then do a follow-up that might be relevant for people, say, who have attended across 5 different workshops. And that way there's still an option there, but we're getting around some of the challenges of those sort of numbers. The other thing we do is we have tried a reduced refresher rate. So for those who come to the first workshop, and what we often find is they just realise just how much there is to know and perhaps how little they have yet to, process. We've tried an option where just running other workshops in the area, if there's a return attendee, they come at half the price. They often get a lot more out of it the second time around, because instead of just trying to get their head around the concepts, they're more into that sort of planning and action phase. So again, nothing's been set in stone at this point, because we really do need to see how they land in these next set of pilots. But all those options are on the table, because we sort of recognise that's an important part of getting any practice change and action out of a workshop.
And I guess if NRM regions were looking at becoming participating in your co-delivery model, which I know some of them do for other Edge Network programs, and Bruce Lord has a question there, which I'll follow up in a moment. It could be that the follow-up is another program entirely. Like, it's not the MLA thing. It could be, okay, so you've been through CarbonEdge and the NRM is running this, or another program is running a more detailed or a follow-up. It could start to integrate some of the programs together a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an ideal outcome too, Kate. Like, we're not wedded to things having to be labelled as an MLA event. Like, for us, I guess our interest is in seeing producers moving towards the CN30 goal, and it's always been about seeing some productivity gains alongside. So as long as we're seeing those happening, for us, if Edge fits into a broader scope of activities, that's perfect. And that's, I guess, where we have things like the demonstration sites model, where if you had a group of interested producers, that can be a co-funded model where we work on that with you as well. So there's a few other options there to keep the momentum if there's a group of people interested in pursuing, some activities on farm or something.
Yep. Bruce Lord is just wondering, he knows it's early days. He appreciates that it's still in the pilot phase, but just that it is still a producer pays model. Are the likely standard costs similar to the other Edge packages?
Yes. So we standardise the costs of Edge. Again, that needs to be something we test, the product price point. The pilot workshops will be subsidised, just because the focus of those is actually on getting good feedback into the program, not on a returns model. But because of the nature of it, I guess we need to make sure it's there's value in it for the deliverers. There's a fair bit of time in preparing the workshop material as well as delivering it, in that we we'll be using things like regionalised case studies and things, and the deliverer, we do rely a little bit on the deliverer pulling some of that material together if available. The other thing probably worth mentioning around the cost, and it is quite high, it's hard to get producers to pay unless they really see value. We do usually limit participant numbers. So we find when we're doing exercises like a planning exercise, for the deliverer to be able to sort of meaningfully get around the group and engage with people on their sort of individualised plan, we do recommend no more than 15 per deliverer, but we think 12 is probably a more manageable number. So just having said that, they're often not huge workshops, or if they are, you often have 2 deliverers delivering, and so that just factors into the costings as well.
Thank you very much for your time and for the information. I think the fact that we had nearly 50 people online today shows that there is a fair bit of interest in this, and as regional representatives, I guess, across the country, there's quite a lot of interest in how we can start fitting together some of these carbon outreach and carbon education type programs around the country. So thank you very much. To everyone else, thank you for coming along. I'm glad that we could get such a good crowd. I think it is a really important topic.